Lionel Barrymore's name seems to echo from Hollywood's golden age like a distant legend. But behind that famous surname lies a man torn between his fierce artistic passions and the demands of a family dynasty. Today, we're diving into the lesser known stories that shaped him, from the moment he cried on stage to avoid acting to the final days when he commanded the screen from a wheelchair. Get ready for an unexpected tale of rebellion, tragedy, and triumph. Family legacy and early rebellion. Born Lionel Herbert Blythe in 1878, he was destined for the stage well before he learned to walk. His parents, Georgiana Drew Barrymore and Maurice Barrymore, weren't just actors. They were part of a theatrical empire. The Barrymore family was like royalty in the theater world, and they had every intention of passing that crown to their children. From the moment Lionel could toddle onto a stage, he was included in elaborate stage productions alongside his mother and father. It seemed inevitable that he would become a star. But as fate would have it, Lionel wasn't exactly eager to follow this predetermined path. While most children might have been excited to play dress up in the wings of a theater, Lionel wanted none of it. In one dramatic instance, he stepped on stage as a child and simply burst into tears, refusing to recite his lines. Even though his crying performance might have brought laughter and some peculiar applause, it revealed an internal tug of war. He yearned to chart his own destiny. The yearning to paint, that passion for finding his own way, manifested early. Lionel had a natural inclination toward painting, and he insisted he wouldn't let the lure of the spotlight pull him away from his first love. Instead of polishing lines for a script, he was mixing paints on a canvas. To strengthen his dedication, he studied at the Art Students League of New York, hoping to refine his technique into a full-fledged career. Painting for him was more than just a pastime. It was the opportunity to leave behind the clamor of backstage dressing rooms and the pressure of living up to the Barrymore name. With determined ambition, he even moved to Paris around 1906, the global nucleus of artistic innovation. He hoped the city of light would illuminate a promising path for his paintings. Surrounded by world-renowned artists, bohemian cafes, and the swirling energy of modern art, he believed he was on the brink of discovering his true identity. Yet Paris wasn't the utopia he had dreamed of. Gallery owners and critics hardly batted an eye at his work. Struggling to pay his bills, Lionel made the difficult decision to retreat to the United States, painting supplies in tow, conceding that this version of his artistic dream wasn't paying off. Path to Broadway and silent film's reality hit hard when Lionel returned home. He needed a paycheck, and acting was in his blood, no matter how much he'd fought against it. He soon found himself treading the boards on Broadway, often alongside his illustrious relatives, like his uncle John Drew Jr. In productions such as The Second in Command and The Mummy and the Hummingbird, audiences discovered something remarkable about Lionel. He wasn't just the product of a famous bloodline, he had genuine talent. Despite his earlier tears on stage, he brought a solemn intensity to dramatic roles. Some critics speculated that he channeled his frustration over giving up painting into his acting, granting him a depth not often seen in performers of his era. Whatever the reason, his performances resonated with theatergoers and producers alike. It wasn't long before he transitioned into silent films during the 1910s. Titles like The Battle, 1911, The New York Hat, 1912, and Three Friends, 1913, showcased his ability to captivate viewers without uttering a single line. The silent film era demanded an exaggerated style of acting, with each movement amplified to convey emotions when dialogue couldn't. Lionel excelled at this. His expressive face and commanding presence made him a perfect fit for a medium that thrived on raw, visible emotion. By the latter part of the decade, he had established himself as a serious performer on both stage and screen, yet part of him still carried that lingering dream of painting, unfulfilled but never entirely forgotten. Directing controversy and Hollywood ascent. As the 1920s rolled in, he shifted his energies predominantly toward film, which was a booming industry hungry for charismatic performers. Lionel's success in front of the camera eventually opened the door behind it, too. In 1929, he took the helm as a director for the contentious film His Glorious Night, starring John Gilbert. The movie stirred quite a bit of attention, largely because talkies, films with synchronized sound, were still new and risky. Gilbert, a massive star in the silent era, struggled to adapt to talk in pictures, and Lionel's direction was caught in the crosshairs. Audiences and critics were brutal in their critique, calling the film stiff and unappealing. But controversies often spark curiosity, and the public was intrigued by Barrymore's foray into directing. He soon directed other projects, including Madam X, featuring Ruth Chatterton and The Rogue Song. Although these endeavors showcased his willingness to experiment and take creative risks, he ultimately returned to acting full-time. Directing had offered him a new perspective, yet it didn't eclipse his growing reputation as one of the most compelling actors of his day. Triumph and tragedy. The real turning point of Lionel Barrymore's career arrived in 1931 with his portrayal of an alcoholic lawyer in A Free Soul. This was no mere role for him. It felt like an unfiltered dive into the human psyche, weaving raw vulnerability and simmering intensity into every scene. When he ultimately earned the Academy Award for Best Actor, it wasn't just a triumph for the Barrymore name. It signaled a moment when critics and fans alike recognized his ability to shape a character from the inside out. The film's success catapulted him to a new echelon of Hollywood prominence, surrounding him with lucrative offers and admirers eager to see what he would attempt next. Yet the glare of success hid deeper, more troubling undercurrents. Success in the public eye couldn't erase the profound personal grief he carried. Lionel's first marriage to Doris Rankin had produced two daughters, but both babies tragically passed away while still infants. The heartbreak gnawed at him and cast a grim shadow over his professional victories. Some say the pain of losing his children fueled the emotional weight he brought to characters on screen, especially tortured or conflicted figures. Others believe this anguish contributed to a sense of restlessness, an ever-present need to keep moving and creating so he wouldn't be left alone with his thoughts. The sorrow splintered his relationship with Rankin. By 1923, the emotional toll was too great, and they went their separate ways. Later that same year, he found a brief sanctuary in marriage to actress Irene Fenwick. She offered support and understanding during a turbulent period, helping Lionel steady himself as he juggled massive career highs with devastating personal lows. Their relationship, however, was another chapter marked by sadness when Fenwick passed away in 1936. Through it all, Lionel never relinquished his devotion to acting, perhaps seeing each new part as both an escape and a form of catharsis. Every time he stepped into a role, he could momentarily set aside the weight of his losses, channeling them instead into riveting on-screen portrayals that left audiences spellbound. In a sense, his Academy Award stood not only as a testament to his skill, but also as a tribute to his relentless drive to create meaning out of life's most painful moments. As the 1930s bled into the 1940s, Barrymore found himself cornered by a merciless adversary, deteriorating health. Chronic arthritis gnawed at his joints until ordinary tasks became agonizing feats. His doctors warned him to slow down, but Lionel was never one to accept limitations without a fight. In an industry that thrived on glamour and physicality, many assumed that once he required a wheelchair, his days of front and center roles were over. Instead, he persisted, determined to prove his worth even if he could no longer stride across a stage or set. His persistence shone in iconic films like Grand Hotel, 1932, and Captain's Courageous, 1937, where he exuded a grounded, often paternal authority. But it was in Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life, 1946, that he etched one of cinema's most memorable villains, Mr. Potter. Confined to his wheelchair, Barrymore wielded his piercing gaze and gravelly voice to create a chilling, utterly believable antagonist. The performance offered a stark reminder that true talent lies in the craft, not in the physical mobility of the actor. To accommodate his physical constraints, sets were modified and camera angles reworked, demonstrating Hollywood's respect for what he brought to the screen. In effect, the wheelchair became an extension of his character, underscoring Potter's ruthless spirit and intensifying his on-screen presence. Off-screen, Barrymore discovered another frontier where his physical challenges seemed to vanish: radio. His annual portrayal of Ebenezer Scrooge in A Christmas Carol became must-listen entertainment during the holiday season. Without any visual cues, his resonant voice alone had to conjure the tight-fisted miserliness of Scrooge. Listeners tuned in faithfully, many unaware that the man behind that gripping performance could no longer walk. Through radio, he maintained a personal connection with fans who admired his skill and empathized with his struggles. While his physical condition worsened, Lionel's commitment to his craft never wavered. He dismissed any notion that he should retire, insisting that if his mind and voice still functioned, he had no excuse to leave the stage or microphone. His steadfast presence underscored the power of adaptability, reminding audiences that determination can often surpass the boundaries imposed by the human body. Rather than quietly fading from the public eye, Lionel used his wheelchair-bound status to explore roles that tapped into an even deeper well of emotion, ensuring that his legacy was not merely preserved, but amplified during his later years. Lingering legacy and final days. His health woes, however, weren't limited to arthritis. A hip injury made mobility even more challenging, and the physical pain contributed to a steady decline over the years. Still, Lionel found ways to remain creative. He composed music, often inspired by his own emotional experiences, and maintained a small artist studio attached to his home in Los Angeles. He never truly let go of his first love, painting, continuing to draw, sketch, and paint whenever he could. His second wife's passing in 1936 was another crushing emotional blow, but he carried on, channeling personal sorrow into the grumpy or grandfatherly characters that fans adored. Over time, he accepted the peculiar blend of heartbreak and admiration that shaped his life. He may not have been able to stand on his own, but his presence loomed large in every film he touched. On November 15, 1954, Lionel Barrymore passed away from a heart attack in Van Nuys, California. At 76, his body finally gave out after decades of relentless aches and pains. He was laid to rest at Calvary Cemetery in East Los Angeles, joining the ranks of Hollywood luminaries whose final resting places are visited by fans in awe of their cinematic contributions. Even after his death, the tributes poured in. In 1960, he received 2 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, one for motion pictures and another for radio, an honor that underscores the breadth of his accomplishments. Lionel Barrymore's life was, at its core, a perpetual balancing act between personal ambition and family expectations. The boy who once cried on stage became one of Hollywood's most celebrated actors, winning an Oscar and carving a lasting place in cinematic history. Yet behind the accolades and fame was a man constantly wrestling with internal struggles, mourning his lost children, grappling with physical pain, and clinging to the artistic dream he once chased in Paris. He showed the world that genuine talent isn't limited by wheelchairs or family legacies. It shines through commitment, passion, and the courage to keep creating despite the obstacles. Whether you remember him as Mr. Potter's menacing glare or the warm voice of Ebenezer Scrooge on the radio, Lionel Barrymore's story reminds us that life seldom unfolds as planned. Sometimes you end up discovering your greatest calling right where you least expected it, amid heartbreak, setbacks, and the unwavering spotlight of a famous name. And in those moments, true legends are born.